All right, guys, so in this video, I want to start to work on the registration route, which is going to be a post request to API/users. So we don't actually need this GET request. This was just to kind of test it out. So I'm going to change this to a post request. So we want to do router.post. And let's change the description here to register user. All right, now we want to be able to send data to this route. We need to send a name, an email, and a password in order to register a user. Let's actually wrap this res.send in curly braces and just push it down like that so that we can do some other stuff in here. Now I want to console log here the request.body because that's the object of data that's going to be sent to this route. Now I'll save this, but in order for this to work, request.body, we have to initialize the middleware for the body parser. Now, you used to have to actually install body parser as a separate package and bring it in and then initialize it, but now it's actually included with Express. So we can just go, let's go right here, let's just say init middleware, and we'll say app.use, and instead of doing body parser .json like we used to, we can now just simply do express.json, and we're just going to pass in an object of extended false. All right, so just doing that one line should allow us to get the data in request.body. So how do we send data? We're going to go to Postman, and instead of making a GET request to API users, we're going to make a POST request. And in the headers, we're going to add a value of content type, which is right here. And that content type is going to be application/JSON. All right, and then in the body, we're going to choose raw, and we're just going to send some raw JSON. So let's just do name, and I'll just do my own name here. And if I send that, we still get user route as a response, but if we look in our console down here, you'll see an object with name Brad Traversy. So we can send whatever data we want and access it with request.body. Now, before we do any of the logic to deal with the database and register a user, we need to handle validation and responses if the user doesn't send the right stuff. Okay, we need a name, email, and password. So this is where Express Validator comes in. So we're going to go up to the top here, and let's bring in a couple things. So we're going to use curly braces here. We want to bring in something called check and validation result, and that's going to come from express-validator/check. Okay, and this is all in the documentation. In fact, I'll pull that up real quick. Just if you want to look at the different rules and stuff, you can. So this is the GitHub page, and then this link is the documentation. So basically, we just did this, bring it in, and then within our route, we can add a second parameter as middleware, and we can call this check, pass in a field such as username, and then add a rule like is email, which will make sure it's an email. We can do password, is length, minimum length, stuff like that. All right, and then within the route, you want to just set this errors array to the result and check to see if there's any errors. If there is, you want to send a response saying that the name isn't there or whatever the validation is, and it will send something like this. So let's go ahead and add a second parameter to our post method here, our post route. So I'm going to put in a set of brackets, and within here we can run that check function, and let's check for the name, and then we can pass in a second parameter with a custom error message. Otherwise it's going to be some generic message. So I'm just going to say name is required. All right, and then the rule for this, because remember we're just checking to make sure it's there, we actually have to do two. We have to do .not and then .is empty, which took me a while to figure out, but that's the solution if we just want it, if we want it to be there and not empty. So I'm just going to save that. Prettier will kind of fix it up for us. And then let's put a comma here and let's add our next check. And this is going to be for the email. And the message is going to be please include a valid email. And the rule is going to be .is email, which will make sure it's an actual valid email address, like formatted as an email address. And then let's do a check on the password and put our message. We'll say please enter a password with 6 or more characters. And then the rule is going to be .is length, and you can check out all these rules in the documentation, and we're going to pass in a minimum of 6. All right, so I'll save that. That sets all the validation. Now to handle the response, we have to go within here, within the actual body, and we're going to go ahead and set errors to validation result, which takes in the request. Okay, and then we just want to check for errors, so we can do that with if, and we want to do if not errors dot is empty. Okay, that make sure you put parentheses. This is a function, so we want to make sure that if there are errors, that's what we're saying here, then what do we want to do as a response? So let's return, and let's do res.status, because we don't want to send a 200 because that means everything's okay. We want to send a 400, which is a bad request, and that's what this is. If they don't include this information correctly, it's a bad request. And then I just want to send back JSON, and we can get these error messages. We want these to be visible in the response. So we're going to say JSON. Let's do errors, and let's set that to errors. So errors, and then there's a method called array. All right, so we want to send that back. So let's go ahead and save this. Now, if any of these don't match, then we should get this response, a 400 with some errors. So let's go back to Postman. Now all I have here is a name, so we should get an error. So let's send. All right, now notice the response status is 400 bad request. And if we look here, we have an array of errors. We have an object with an array called errors, which gives us a couple other objects that have a location. Now location is always going to be body because that's the type of error this is. We're sending it in the body. And then we have the param, which has the actual field, which is email in this case, and then the message, which is our custom message. Please include a valid email. All right, so that's how it works. And if I forget the name, let's just take this out and send. Now we get name is required. All right, so we can handle this in React on our front end however we want. If we want to display these inside of an alert, we can do that. Okay, so I think that Express Validator is a pretty nice solution, and you don't have to worry about like empty strings. Since I did is required and I send, we're still going to get name is required, and that can be tricky to deal with if you do custom validation. All right, so let's try to actually send the correct stuff here. So we'll do name, email. We'll say Brad at Gmail. Actually, I'm going to use an email that has a gravatar just so when we get to that, that will show. So techguyinfo. And then let's do a password, which remember has to be 6 characters or more. I'm just going to do 1 through 6. All right, so if I send that, notice that we get a 200 response, which means everything's okay, and we get our user route. All right, so validation is working well. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this. Let's say save as, and we want to choose the users and auth collection, and I'm going to just change this to register user and save. So that way, inside users and auth, whenever we want to make this request, we can simply just choose this and we can register a user. All right. Now, in the next video, we want to actually start adding our logic to register a user. So I will see you in the next one.